There are many things parents feel when they realize their child is struggling with learning to read. Today, we dive into all the feelings and discuss why it is important to support the entire family when a child has trouble learning. My guest today is Maria Fagan Hassani. She is an educational therapist in Southern California and founder of Learning Link. Maria helps struggling learners grow their academic superpowers with soaring confidence through free resources, group programs, and private educational therapy services. She has successfully supported hundreds of learners and their families over the past 20 years. Maria has helped students who have needed help with time management, executive functioning training, and those who have difficulty with the reading process. Join us for this conversation.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social-emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hi, Maria. Welcome to the Diverse Thinking, Different Learning podcast.
Hi, Dr. Karen. How you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
It's Friday, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
That also means that I'm a little extra tired, but I know we're going to have a great conversation anyway, so that's great.
Yes, we are. It's always great to talk to you.
You too. You know, I wanted to have you on the podcast because we've been talking a great deal about reading. And, you know, in episode 21, we talked to Dr. Lauren about dyslexia. And then the following episode, we talked to Faru Azimi about interventions for reading, specifically evidence-based programs. And I know that you have a very comprehensive approach to addressing and supporting struggling readers. So I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk a little bit about what you do. So let's start there. Let's start with telling our listeners a little bit about what you do.
Great. Yes, and I have listened to the episode you speak of, so they were very good and very informative, by the way. So I'm glad to be able to add context and information to those already existing podcasts. But I am an educational therapist, which means I work one-on-one with kids who have learning challenges. But I don't only work with the child, I also work with the parent, as well as all the professionals that are affiliated with that child. Oftentimes there's an occupational therapist, a speech pathologist, a neurologist, a psychologist. There's a variety of professionals that can be working with that child as well as their classroom teacher. And so it is my job to not only provide the support for that child academically, but to also bring all of those professionals and parents together to create the best learning environment for that child possible.
And I think that that is so important, you know, that kind of complementary professional approach and that collaborative approach to supporting a child, because it's not just one person. It's not just you who can address the issue. It really takes a team effort to address the underlying issues and supporting a child who's struggling.
Absolutely. Because I don't always see everything. I obviously have a lens that I put on as educational therapist when I'm with that child and talking to their parents. But there's obviously other professionals who wear a different lens. And when those lenses can intersect, oftentimes we get the greatest vision for that child and can all work together in partnership to deliver an excellent education system.
Absolutely. And, you know, so by the time parents come to you with their child, that child has already been identified as having a struggle with reading or a struggle with writing or some other area of difficulty that's impacting their academics. And, you know, what we've been talking about a great deal is that oftentimes that parents feel, you know, a sense of isolation. There may be other feelings that are coming up as a result of realizing that their child is struggling. And oftentimes, again, we talk a lot about the child who is struggling, and that's so important. And the work that you do in helping that child develop strategies and your approach to implementing programs that help the children read, write, and do all the things that they need to do in order to be successful are important. But it seems that parents are also dealing with their own feelings about having a child who's struggling. Is that something that you've been finding?
Absolutely. Very often, the parents, through conversation with them, will sort of fall into two different camps, if you will. One, I never struggled in school. I don't understand why my child is struggling in school. His or her father, mother had trouble in school, but I don't really relate to that, so I'm not sure how to help. And then there's the other side of the coin is I had a lot of trouble in school. I didn't get the support I needed. I don't really know how to help and I'm broken myself. So how can I even attempt to try to help my child? And it's very sad for me in either case there, because I think that parents have tools and skills they can utilize to help their children. But oftentimes there's so much shame and embarrassment that comes with the diagnosis, and the understanding that their child learns differently, as well as a sense of isolation. They feel, at least initially, like they're the only one that has a child who fits this description and learns in these quote unquote different ways. And that's one of the best parts of my job, honestly, is working one-on-one with the child. I get a lot of time with the parents, so I get to help them understand that they're not alone. There's many, many parents who have children who learn differently. And though it may appear in the classroom that all children are learning and everything is fine and everybody's doing it okay, except for your child, but that's not really the case. That many kids are struggling from one degree to another, in one subject or another, but that everybody needs a helping hand at some point in time, and that it's not embarrassing or shameful if that is the need. Even if the needs are extensive, it's the job of us for us as educators to make sure we're bringing the learning environment to the child. So I try to help eliminate some of that embarrassment or shame or feeling alone, by imparting my knowledge from the classroom and the many children and parents that I've worked with previously.
Right. And I think that is so important to recognize those feelings that the parents might have. And you talked about, that sense of isolation, the embarrassment and the shame. And that often leads to behaviors, and I think you've talked about that desire to push kids to do better. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then you probably also have the other side of the coin.
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, actually. Many parents who are high performing did really well in school, do really well in life. If they are struggling to cope with the fact that their child has a learning challenge and may just process things or do life more slowly than they do, tend to want to jump in and help and do all of the work and make sure that their child does all of the homework, assignments, et cetera, that they're supposed to be doing in class. And so they're running in to save. And then you have, as you mentioned, the other side of that coin where you have parents who just, as I said, may have struggled themselves, barely made it through school, and their heart is not intact around learning. And so they tend to push back and feel as though they can't help in any way. And again, given my profession of educational therapy and therapist, being able to help, I get the opportunity to talk to parents about the ways in which they can help their children in productive ways, and when they are rushing in to help and save, not completely doing everything, finding ways to help engage their child in ways that make sense and are productive for their child, and helping the child to learn more about their learning styles, and helping the teachers see how their child themselves does the work, because that's going to be most informative for the classroom. The teacher really doesn't need to see the parents' work. They need to see the child's work so that they know where the child is and how they might modify or adjust or accommodate for that child to make sure they're bringing education to that child. And on the other side, if you're not feeling like you're adequate to be able to help, you might be surprised that there are ways that you can help your child. Maybe it's just reading to them at night. There's lots of research to show that reading with kids and to kids is very productive and definitely helps them learn to read. So if you feel as though that is just one little thing you're doing, it can be very beneficial. And so it's looking around for those things that you can do to help your child be more productive and be a partner with them for learning.
And it's almost like that fine line, because as a parent, you want to do all that you can to support your child. I mean, that's just human nature. But again, what you're talking about is the fact that you don't want parents to do too much, because then teachers actually can't see what the children are actually capable of doing on their own. And it may mask some difficulties that they might be having, and it prevents you from intervening in an appropriate way.
Right, exactly. The teacher might think that everything's fine because all the work is getting turned in. It's beautiful. Everything's correct. There's no problem. But meanwhile, the parent is doing most of the work, and obviously out of concern and really wanting their children to do well. Yet it, as you said, it masks what the child is really capable of doing or not capable of doing. So when I talk with parents who are engaging in those kinds of behaviors, I try to coax them to really pull back and allow their child to lead. And that's really difficult, I think, sometimes when their child is unsure or processes in a different way or learns in a different way than the parent. It often creates conflict. Because the parent wants the child to perform, get it done, let's go. We have an hour for homework, then we have dinner, then we have music, then we have, there's an agenda, there's a routine.
Right.
We need to get things done. And I can understand that. It's that although that becomes sort of like a pressure for that child, and it can create, as I said, create conflict between the parent and the child. And often when parents and children come into my office, there has been a learning challenge or disability diagnosed, yet the parent is intervening, and every intervention is met with a pushback, a resistance of some sort. And sometimes that escalates into yelling and fights, which is very uncomfortable. So we have to sort of look at those interactions, dissect them, and start talking about, again, how to let the child lead and how to have parameters around how, as a parent, you intervene and allow the child to be in the driver's seat as much as they possibly can.
And that's where your role is so important, because oftentimes parents will jump in and try to assume your role, as the person who is helping them to develop strategies and to address the learning issue, when that can actually create more conflict.
Yes. And if parents are able to hire me, we are all truly privileged. And it is not every child that parents who can afford to have me as their educational therapist. But that's a whole nother conversation for a different time. But in the context of the fact that they can, yes, it is. They are trying to sometimes take on that role. And it can create conflict because there's sometimes maybe the parent is asking them to do something differently than I'm asking the child to do. And so then the child is kind of there in the middle, not knowing which way to go. So when I work with parents, again, I try to help them be the best parent they can be, because I am not the child's parent. They are the child's parent, and that is the only parent they will have. So I want them to be able to do that role to the best of their ability for their child, and then allow me to do the remediation or the learning piece so that they can retain that relationship with their child.
Right. I agree. I absolutely agree. And I think that approach is so important to preserve the child-parent relationship. And it also allows the child to develop autonomy and independence around learning and take ownership of that with your support. And, when we work with kids who've been struggling, there's a process. The child struggles, then the reason for the struggle is identified. And then they get the appropriate level of support, hopefully, right? That's the goal, is for them to get the support that they need, to address the underlying issue. And do you ever, when a child is struggling and they come into your office, and I'm sure that you do this, talk to the child about the struggles that they're having? Because I can't tell you how many parents have not explained and don't let me explain to their child that they have a certain learning profile or a learning struggle. And I always offer it as an option, and I encourage it. I say, I can have a conversation with your child about what we found. And of course, it's going to be age appropriate. But it seems that you are obviously in that position to explain, because you're doing the work, and the children have to understand, why am I working with you? What are we doing here? Why is this important?
Yes, absolutely. That's actually one of the very first questions I ask, because I talk to the parent obviously first when they are told that they need my services. And usually that conversation is filled with explaining what an educational therapist does and how I will be helping the child and their family. But then the next step is I have the family come into my office to make sure that it's really a fit once we all see each other, and obviously not in the middle of a pandemic. If we were in the pandemic, we meet on Zoom. But nonetheless, the point is we all meet as a group. And most importantly, because I want that child to not feel as though they're having something done to them, but rather this is part of the process and they are involved in the decision making. And if they meet me and they feel as though it is not a match and they don't want to do this, then they have, from my perspective, the right to say, I don't think this is a match for me. So that is already putting them, in the driver's seat on a level playing field with all of us to be part of the equation. And obviously it's age appropriate. That conversation with a 6-year-old is very different than with a high school student, but still they're always part of the equation, and they've met me before they start seeing me in the office for us to start working together. And a question that I ask in that when we're all gathered as a family is, so what do you know about why you're coming here? What have your parents told you so far? And it'll be a range of, well, no, they just told me we had an appointment tonight, so come on over, to, well, I've been struggling in school. I went to have this evaluation, or I had this evaluation at school, and now I know that I learn differently than other people, other students, and so I need a little bit of help. And with else in between. And so when I don't get those answers that are knowledge filled, or where the children don't have an understanding yet, yes, once they're in my stead and we are working together, it often comes up, because the response from the child will be, well, why do I have to do this? Mm-hmm. Why the teacher didn't tell me I had to do that way. Why are you making me do this? Why do I have to do that again? That's right. Often like, how come we're doing this over and over and over again? And so it offers fodder for lots of conversations about, well, you're learning to read, and learning to read for you is difficult. So we have to do a lot of practice to help you learn to read. So that means we do this thing over and over and over again. And the fun thing is that we get to create different ways to make that happen. And I work obviously in partnership with the child to figure out creative and fun ways to be able to do that thing that we need to do many times over. Which is the fun part. But there is also that conversation about why, how come, why do I have to come here twice a week? None of my other friends have a tutor, which is often what I'm called. They're all doing just fine. They don't need anybody. I can do it too. And so it, as I said, brings fodder for conversations about why and what's going on with them and their brain, and how they learn, and how they see the world, and how they process information. It's personally one of the most fun parts of my job, because I get to explain all about learning.
Right. And it seems that once kids have that information about learning and about their brain, that motivates them to want to work with you, because they know why they're doing it and what is, the goal at the end of your work together.
Yes, it definitely is motivating, and it allows me the opportunity to show progress along the way. So we can say, look, 2 months ago when you did this, you were only here. Now look at all that you know about this topic or about reading, or how quickly you're reading, or how many words you can decode, or how many sight words you know. We can always show progress, which is always motivating for children if they see themselves growing and doing better.
Right. And then that increases their self-confidence and improves their self-concept, which again is a motivation for them to continue to work towards learning.
Right. And take a pride and own, as you said already, ownership in their learning process, and being proud of knowing how they learn rather than being embarrassed by it.
Right. And it sounds like you do such a good job of explaining to them, why they need to come and see you and why it's important. And I just think it's so important for kids to understand their learning profile, right? We know it's not a learning style, but their learning profile. What are their strengths? What are things that are harder for them? And I think everybody understands that, because we all have things that we're good at and things that are harder for us. And we have to work harder on those things that are more of a struggle.
Right. Exactly. And I've read some research on that about kids who do struggle in school with academic related activities do better in life, because they've learned that you work harder on things that come harder to you. Kids who sail through school and don't ever have to work harder because it comes easily to them, when they get out in the real world in life, and they hit struggles and hardship, they're not familiar as much with that concept. And so they tend to kind of just fold more easily. I think that's sort of speaking to the tenacity and resilience of kids who struggle with the learning process.
Absolutely, because that makes sense, because those kids who have struggled have developed problem-solving strategies and coping skills and have had the experience of overcoming difficulty and having to work hard to get through an area that's more of a struggle for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, anytime we're doing this work, when parents bring kids into our office, the focus is on the child. My child is struggling and we really want to find a way to help him or to help her. But parents need support too. And I'm hearing from you that your work extends beyond your one-on-one work with kids. And I'd love for you to talk about that and the evolution of that, because that's so important because of the things that we talked about initially about parents feeling embarrassed or experiencing shame and feeling a sense of isolation like you described.
Yes. And before I was in private practice, I was a classroom teacher, both in regular education classrooms as well as special ed classrooms, and then learning specialist at a variety of different public and private schools. And most of the time within those schools, we would have a community of parents who would get together routinely to discuss what was going on with their children, how to support their children. Parents who had been at the school longer could tell the parents who just came about this and that teacher. You want to ask in this way. You want to do this with that teacher, to help them be able to get what they needed from the teachers and work in partnership with the teachers to, again, bring the best education to their child possible. And it just was such a sense of community. And while obviously I have a voice and it can add information, being a specialist in my area of learning. But more important than that, it was really a community. That was what I really enjoyed about those meetings, was the sense of community of parents being able to talk to each other and help each other. And sending the parent in the right direction as a result of a conversation between a parent, another parent, and offering guidance and support. It really was very, very helpful. I just remember so many tear-filled meetings where parents would be coming in and saying, my child's just not going to make it through third grade. He's failing math. He's failing reading. He can't write a paragraph, and the teacher is on him all the time. I just don't even know where to go. And so many of the parents would rally around that one parent to be able to help guide them. As I said, navigating the teachers, navigating the school. I would offer my opinion about perhaps evaluations or support that child would need. But we would all work together for the common goal of easing the parent struggles and helping them understand what is needed, and then ultimately transferring that to the child. So yes, I've put together a number of courses and curriculum to support parents in understanding just that. What are learning challenges? What are the struggles their child is going through when they have a learning difference or learning disability? And the current one that I'm doing is focused on reading. Because reading challenges, there's so much involved in them. And your last two podcasts did such a great job of breaking down the areas that children struggle with when they're trying to learn to read. And what I do in this 3-week course is the first thing we do is just break it into the pieces, decoding, fluency, comprehension, so that a parent, and I put it in parent-friendly language, so the parent can really start to understand and digest that report that they got from someone like you. Because often those reports are so comprehensive and so detailed. They're so great when I read them and implement them. But a parent will say, yeah, she explained everything to me, but I don't really remember now, or I don't understand how that looks in real life. Like, what does that mean in terms of when my child is doing X, Y, Z? So I do my best in the first week of our class together and our time together to try to dissect challenges that are happening when a child is diagnosed with a reading challenge, and how it shows up in those different areas and what they might see in their child, and then how they can support their child depending on the struggles that are prevalent. And I bring in what I call allied advisors. Those are the occupational therapists, speech pathologists, neuropsychs, people like yourself, to help guide the conversation and help parents understand and more effectively understand why they would need each of those professionals. Because again, oftentimes those are listed out at the back of the report, and they're like, well, just go see the educational therapist, and then you might need to segue into occupational therapy and then speech, or you might need to do them simultaneously. But the parent is overwhelmed, and they're really not sure how to prioritize and work together with all of the professionals. So I try, again, during this class, to try to break that down into manageable pieces and help parents understand when and if they need to go to one of those professionals. And I have those professionals talk to the parents so they can explain through their own words when they're needed and how they're needed. And then I also talk about the gifts that the learning challenges like this bring. Because often, as you said, the focus is on that child and how hard it is. And, we're struggling right now. Are we ever going to make it out of first grade? Is my child ever going to learn to read?
Right.
And that is sort of the mindset that you come in with. But during this class, I really want to work with parents to help them sort of flip that on its head and really see the gifts that come with those types of challenges. And we've alluded to some of them in our conversation here about the problem solving, the sense of self, the understanding one's learning needs at a very deep level. If you are confronted with struggling to learn to read, one of the very first academic pieces that we give children that parlays into all areas of life later on. If you struggle with that at a very young age and you get through it successfully, you're going to have lots of talents and gifts later in life had you not had that challenge. So I want to just illuminate that for parents as much as I can in the moment so that they can see that and start talking to their children about those things as well. Because oftentimes the parent will hear from the child, I'm so broken. I don't know how to do this. I'll never know how to do this. This is so hard. I'll never learn to read. I can't do this. So being able to talk to them about the fact that they will make it through, and here are the great things that I see about you, and that they're going to get even stronger and greater as you grow and move through this challenge. And if there's time, we do I do talk to the parents about how to talk to their children about their learning struggles and specific to the learning challenge they have, so we can put it in kid-friendly language and help them understand at the moment what the struggle is for them.
Right. And it seems like a lot of that work is, coaching the parents on how to support their child who has been struggling, with also an emphasis on recognizing their child's strengths and bringing their child's attention to their strengths.
Right. The child's and the parents, both of them simultaneously. Yes.
And it seems like, you're supporting the parents, you're supporting the child, which is just a tremendous approach. I think that should be the model kind of moving forward with kids who are struggling, is that you don't just work on the child, you work on the whole family and supporting that child and rallying around that child and helping parents to know, what do you say when my child says, I'm dumb, or I shouldn't have to work this hard, or this is too hard for me, or I just want to give up, or why bother? You are there to not only support the child to develop the skills, but you're also there to support the parent so that they know how to support their children.
Yes. Yes. That I would count that as a job well done if we achieve that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it seems that parents also need support in kind of navigating the school system. And does your work also extend to helping parents know how to partner with their school to ensure that their kids are getting the support that they need, maybe the accommodations and the modifications that were outlined in some of those reports that I write?
Yes. We do touch on that for sure. When we get into the methods of how to support their child, oftentimes that is the main role of the parent. The child can complete the work and does okay on the homework, but the parent is there to advocate at all those meetings to let the teachers know what's going on at home and how much of a struggle it is, and asking for the appropriate accommodations or modifications. So yes, I do talk with them about how to navigate the school system.
That is so fantastic. And, do you give suggestions to parents? Like, what are some common suggestions that you give parents in terms of how to really make sure that they are nurturing those relationships with school officials? Because those are so important. And I've seen some parents navigate those relationships very well. And I've also had parents who've really had some very difficult conversations and difficult interactions with the school regarding what their children need.
Yes, it can be a difficult terrain for sure. And often it's the luck of the draw in terms of the school or the teacher on who you're trying to communicate with. But assuming those lines of communication are open, I encourage parents to engage the teacher as a team member early on, even before school starts, if they can. Perhaps even the year before, the year preceding. So, for example, if your child is going into fourth grade, have a meeting at the end of third grade with the new teachers so that the third grade teachers can explain to the fourth grade teachers what they've tried, what's worked, what hasn't worked, to try to understand that child better before they get in the midst of teaching. And oftentimes I've had students make a presentation to their teachers. They can, if they're technologically minded, they can, do a PowerPoint, or they can just write a letter to the teacher, but they do it in partnership with their parents and go talk to the teacher about who they are as a learner. And that's all done hopefully before school starts. But if school has started and you're already noticing challenges, it's never too late. But you do want to approach it as though you're approaching a team member, because your child sees that person day in, day out, every day. So you want to at least attempt to have them be on your team and be working together in unison for the best of that child. So I just think it's never too early to share information, and share information that will definitely help your child have a better experience at school.
I just think your approach is so empowering, and it's so comprehensive in terms of targeting the child and targeting the parents and the family in general. And I just love what it is that you are doing. And I think that if there's a listener who has a child who's struggling and they have not been in a community of other parents who also have children who have struggled and need that guidance and support that your Education Alliance group is so helpful, would be so helpful to them. So I'm hoping that you will share how people can get in touch with you, because I think you've shared a lot of great information. And I know that parents are probably going to be listening to this thinking, I've provided my child with all of this support, but I need some support now. And I think your group is just a great place for them to start, particularly after they've just perhaps realized that their child has an area of struggle, has a neurodevelopmental disorder, and they're trying to, like you said, navigate the different allied professionals, navigate their partnership with the school, and figure out how to support their child in the best way possible.
Yes. Well, the link to find out more about me as an educational therapist and or schedule a call to talk to me about the course that I'm referring to is learninglink.me/intro. So once again, learninglink, all one word, .me/intro. And if you go to that link, there's also a PDF that I've designed that will help you get your kids to do things that they don't want to do. I curated a variety of responses to the question of how do you get your kids to do things they don't want to do?
I need to download that list. I need to go there right now and download that list. I've got 2 kids.
And so I put all the responses together, and so you can get that. But then there's also, we can schedule a conversation. The link is right there for you to go in, and we can talk about what your needs are, educational therapy wise, and or if this course is the right fit for you. I will be starting it on Thursday, May 13th, and we'll be doing 3 weeks to just close out the school year strong. We'll do it May 13th, May 20th, and May 27th. And we meet for about an hour and a half. And as I said, we're going to do that to finish out the school year strong before we all take a wonderful summer break from this pandemic and get ready to, fingers crossed, go back in person and return to some sense of normalcy.
Wonderful. And we all need that. So, and this is going to air before that date. I think we're going to actually air this podcast episode the last week in April. So people who are listening, it's 2021, and you can get on Maria's list and find out more about that program and get started with her. I think it will be very beneficial to so many parents. Maria, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been such a great conversation. And again, I appreciate all that you do and love the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It was such an honor to be here and have this conversation with you today. Thank you for what you do.
I hope you found this conversation with Maria valuable. I think one of the things that I'm taking away is that, oftentimes, again, the focus is on the child who's struggling, but parents need support too. And I think that there are a lot of resources available to support parents, and we want to be one of those resources. Maria is one of our incredible Child Nexus providers. If you are a provider in the educational therapy space, occupational therapy, speech and language, child psychologist, educational attorney, or if you are the head of a school who serves kids who learn and think differently, I want to hear from you. We are growing our group of diverse professionals who are supporting diverse learners and children who struggle due to neurodevelopmental disorders. So send me a DM on Instagram at Child Nexus Community, and we can see how we can work together to help all kids thrive. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.